Was the greatest battle in ancient history completely erased from our textbooks? The epic clash that supposedly involved millions of warriors, supernatural weapons, and divine intervention might not be just a myth after all. What if I told you that underwater cities, ancient weapons, and astronomical calculations all point to one shocking conclusion? The Mahabharata War actually happened. Stay with me, because the evidence we're about to explore will challenge everything you thought you knew about ancient history. Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of history's greatest mysteries, the real events behind the Mahabharata War. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Isn't that just an ancient Indian myth? Well, that's exactly what I thought too, until I started digging deeper. The Mahabharata epic tells the story of two families of cousins, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, fighting for the throne of Hastinapura in a cataclysmic war at Kurukshetra. For centuries, scholars have debated whether this massive conflict actually happened, or if it's just an elaborate myth. But recent archaeological discoveries are forcing us to reconsider everything. Let's start with something truly mind-blowing. In Kurukshetra, the supposed battlefield of this ancient war, archaeologists have uncovered iron arrows and spearheads dated to approximately 2800 BCE using thermoluminescence dating. That lines up with the time frame mentioned in the Mahabharata itself. Think about that. Actual weapons of war found exactly where the epic says the battle took place. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The Mahabharata mentions cities given to the Pandavas after their exile: Paniprastha, Sonaprastha, and Indraprastha, the latter being identified with Delhi's Purana Kila. Excavations at these sites have yielded pottery and artifacts consistent with the Mahabharata period. That's not coincidence, that's correlation. Now, before we continue, I want to address something many of you might be wondering. If this war was so massive, why isn't it in our history books? The answer is simpler than you might think. Western historical traditions have often overlooked Eastern historical records, and without conclusive proof, academics have been hesitant to classify the epic as history rather than mythology. But that's starting to change, and you're about to see why. The most stunning evidence comes from marine archaeology off the coast of Gujarat. An entire submerged city has been discovered underwater, featuring massive fort walls, piers, wharfs, and a jetty. This matches perfectly with the Mahabharata's description of Dvaraka, Krishna's legendary city that was later reclaimed by the sea. Dr. S.R. Rao, a pioneer in marine archaeology, stated that this discovery is an important landmark in Indian history, settling doubts about the historicity of the Mahabharata. They even found a specific conch shell seal with a three-headed motif that exactly matches a reference in related scripture. The text states that every citizen of Dvaraka should carry this exact type of seal. Talk about attention to detail. But wait, I can already hear some skeptics saying, a few cities and weapons don't prove a massive war happened. You're absolutely right to be critical, and that's why we need to look at the bigger picture. More than 35 sites across North India have yielded archaeological evidence identified as ancient cities described in the Mahabharata. We're talking copper utensils, iron implements, seals, gold and silver ornaments, and a distinctive type of pottery called painted gray ware. This painted gray ware is particularly significant because it's consistently found at sites mentioned in the Mahabharata, dating back to around 1200 to 800 BCE. Renowned archaeologist B.B. Lal has associated the Mahabharata period with this PGW culture. It's like finding the same brand of artifacts across an entire civilization, a shared material signature that connects these sites. Now let's talk about dating this war, because this is where things get really wild. The Mahabharata contains numerous astronomical references that scholars have used to calculate when the war might have occurred. And yes, there's disagreement. Proposals range from 5561 BCE to around the 9th century BCE. Traditional accounts often place the war around 3102 BCE, which coincides with the beginning of Kali Yuga in Hindu cosmology. The 5th century mathematician Aryabhata calculated a similar date of approximately 3100 BCE based on the planetary positions recorded in the text. I know what you're thinking. That's way too early. Human civilization wasn't that advanced back then. But recent archaeological findings at Sinali have uncovered burials with remains of carts dating back to 1800 to 1500 BCE. Some scholars propose this earlier culture is actually a better match for the Mahabharata era than previously thought. Speaking of dating, let me address another question many of you probably have. If this war was real, why can't experts agree on when it happened? That's because the Mahabharata itself evolved over centuries, from an original core of 8,800 verses called Jaya to a 24,000-verse Bharata, to the final Mahabharata, with over 100,000 verses. It's like a historical event that kept getting expanded with each retelling. Beyond archaeology, the Mahabharata's detailed genealogies offer another fascinating avenue of research. The epic centers around the Kuru dynasty, founded by King Kuru, and provides elaborate family trees. What's compelling is that key figures from these genealogies, like Kings Parikshit and Janamejaya, are also mentioned in earlier Vedic texts, such as the Atharva Veda and Shatapatha Brahmana. This cross-referencing between different ancient texts suggests that at least some characters in the Mahabharata were based on historical rulers. It's like finding references to the same person in multiple independent sources, exactly what historians look for when verifying the existence of ancient figures. Some scholars have even proposed that the Grand Mahabharata War might be an amplified version of the Battle of the 10 Kings mentioned in the Rig Veda, which is one of the oldest texts of Indo-European literature. This would be like discovering that a legendary battle was based on a smaller documented historical conflict that grew in the telling. But here's what I find most compelling about the Mahabharata: its detailed knowledge of ancient Indian geography. The epic meticulously lists kingdoms, tribes, cities, rivers, mountains, and forests of ancient India, many of which still exist today or have historical records confirming their past existence. It even mentions the Saraswati River as having an intermittent flow and eventually vanishing, a detail confirmed by geological studies of the ancient riverbed. This is why I believe the Mahabharata likely contains a historical core surrounded by layers of myth and allegory added over centuries. Think of it like a pearl forming around a grain of sand. The grain is the historical event, while the pearl is the magnificent story that developed around it. Of course, we should acknowledge the arguments against the literal historicity of the Mahabharata War. The epic describes supernatural weapons, divine interventions, and battles of a scale that seems implausible. The lack of direct archaeological evidence for a single massive battle on the scale described, such as mass graves, also raises questions. But couldn't the same be said about many ancient conflicts? The Trojan War was once considered purely mythological until archaeological discoveries at Hisarlik in Turkey suggested a historical basis. Maybe the Mahabharata represents a similar blend of history and myth, actual events magnified through the lens of time and cultural significance. So where does this leave us? Was the Mahabharata War a real historical event? Based on the evidence we've explored today, I believe there was likely a significant conflict involving the Kuru kingdom during India's Iron Age. This war became the seed from which the epic Mahabharata grew, enriched by centuries of oral tradition, philosophical teachings, and cultural significance. Whether you see it as literal history or symbolic allegory, the Mahabharata's enduring importance is undeniable. This ancient epic continues to influence Indian culture, philosophy, religion, and social norms to this day. It's been translated into Persian during the Mughal Empire and spread throughout Southeast Asia, showing its universal appeal. What do you think about the historicity of the Mahabharata War? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed exploring this fascinating topic with me, please hit that like button and subscribe for more videos that challenge our understanding of ancient history. And don't forget to check out my other videos on lost civilizations and archaeological mysteries. Until next time, keep questioning the past. The truth might be more extraordinary than we've been told.